But first, I don't know if you know, but a lot of people on the Twitter sphere have been talking about a guy by the name of Jahmai Jones.
Oh, I've seen.
The talk has kind of ramped up recently because of an injury, unfortunately, to Freddy Galvez, which was just unfortunate timing. And any injury, obviously, is unfortunate. But the way it happened, it was painful to watch from our end. Honestly, given the pain that he was experiencing on the field when that happened, at least he's not out for the year, honestly, because it looked like he was in some severe pain if you were watching that Blue Jays game up in Buffalo.
Yeah, it was a right quad injury that he sustained while running to first base. He was forced to leave, obviously, in the second inning of that game. Brandon Hyde says he's probably out 1 to 2 months, which is a huge blow to this Orioles team. Not probably as much to the Orioles lineup. He was hitting pretty well, but I think it's much more of a blow to just the fact that Freddy Galvez was a fantastic shortstop and was consistent defensively, and it is a big loss to not have a consistent shortstop playing day in and day out.
Yeah, the Orioles have not had too much consistency with this team, period. I mean, they obviously have had a rotating cast of characters at second base.
Right.
We've seen Trey Mancini and Ryan Mountcastle cycle in at first. We've seen Austin Hayes go down with injury before eventually coming back. We've seen Anthony Santander miss time with injury. So they haven't had too many guys who have been in the lineup every day. It's been Cedric Mullins, Trey Mancini, either DHing or at first, and it was Freddy Galvez.
Yep.
That was pretty much it. So to see him go down with injury, and of course you think on the personal side of it, it is tough for him. And fortunate that he is going to come back because he still is a free agent at the end of the season. And he was putting up some not bad numbers. You mentioned that, his presence won't be missed that much from the lineup, but he still had 9 homers and was hitting close to 250 with a 720 OPS. That defense will certainly be missed at shortstop, but at least if everything goes well, he will be able to come back maybe August get a final month or two in to show that he's healthy before he hits free agency. And then his money is on the line in terms of the teams are looking at his health.
Right. And it's so tough too to see a guy like Freddy Galvez get hurt because the dude so clearly just loves to play baseball.
Yeah.
That it's hard to watch him not be able to play. I mean, he got hurt and he came back out to the dugout because he wanted to watch the Orioles and he wanted to make sure that he was supporting his teammates.
He was in the dugout in Houston. I think he's staying on the road with the team, which a lot of guys don't do. They just go back and rehab wherever they, would like to rehab. But he's also like a clear presence, and Brandon Hyde has talked about it with Freddy Galvez. He is an actual presence in this clubhouse. He's one of the few guys who's over 30 years old, and teammates seem to love him everywhere that he's been, Cincinnati, Philadelphia. He has built a good reputation of a good clubhouse guy. So it is unfortunate from the personal side of that. And it definitely, I think, almost definitely, don't never say never, takes out of the realm of possibility a Freddy Galvez trade mid-season, because he will definitely be out through the July 30th trade deadline. So teams are probably not going to trade for a guy who is still going to be shelved for maybe another month after that.
Yeah, first and foremost, obviously, the concern is getting Freddy Galvez healthy and what the Orioles are going to do in the lineup in the time that he is out. But it also is unfortunate that probably takes a trade chip off the table for Mike Elias at the deadline. Because like you said, in all probability, Freddy Galvez is probably going to be out another month after the trade deadline. So is a team really going to take that on?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. And he does have a incentive to get traded as well. I think he has a bonus if he does get traded. So, but of course he has talked about returning to this team maybe in free agency. So we'll see when he comes back. But in the meantime, that creates a hole for the Orioles at shortstop. And they have a couple guys who are versatile enough to fill in at shortstop or second base. And the name that everybody wanted to hear on the transaction report or see on the transaction report was Jahmai Jones. He is top 30 prospect in the Orioles system. Came over in a trade with the Angels. There was the Alex Cobb trade. I know you're saying which trade with the Angels because there have been a million. Yeah. It was the Alex Cobb trade. Still only 23, going to turn 24 later on in the season. Brendan, a lot of people were peeved that Jahmai was not called up.
Yes.
I'll say that.
Peeved is a good word to use. Let's start with the shortstop position specifically and how the Orioles are going to fill that role now that Freddy Galvez is out. The leading candidate to probably play most of the games at shortstop is Ramon Arias. He's good defensively. He's not great offensively. He's probably going to hit somewhere around 250. But obviously the most important part there is even if he's hitting 7th or 8th in your lineup, he's still going to be good defensively at shortstop. And like I mentioned before, that's probably what you're missing the most with Freddy Galvez out. So I would think that Ramon Arias is probably going to get most of the run at shortstop with an occasional Pat Valaika mixed in.
Yeah, and then they called up Domingo Leyba, who, if you don't know, they just joined the Orioles organization from the Diamondbacks organization a couple weeks ago. I believed he was claimed off of waivers. So they have 3 guys there who can all, in theory, play shortstop.
Yes, and that's the reason I wanted to bring up the shortstop position first, is because everybody was very upset that Jahmai Jones was not called up. They called up 2 infielders, neither of which were named Jahmai Jones, but Ramon Arias and Domingo Leyba can both play shortstop. You have an injury to Freddy Galvez, who was your primary shortstop. So it makes a lot of sense that you would call up 2 guys who have the ability to play shortstop. Pat Valaika is not fantastic defensively at short, so you would probably rather opt for Ramon Arias or Domingo Leyba at that position defensively. Jahmai Jones can only play second base. He's also the only one of that group of 4, Jones, Valaika, Arias, and Leyba, that can't play third base either. So Jahmai Jones is either going to be second base or outfield, but the 3 guys that the Orioles have that we're going to be talking about outside of Jahmai Jones can play second, short, or third. And that's the versatility that you need at this point if you're Brandon Hyde.
Yeah, and now that they have Ryan McKenna also with the big league team, they don't need the outfield depth that Jahmai Jones could theoretically provide, considering he can play in center field and probably in the corner outfield spots, though he's played very little of that because they've been introducing him to second base, which is still a relatively new position for Jahmai Jones. And he was described by somebody that Rock Cabocco talked about as a little bit rough around the edges still at second base, which is not a knock, just an evaluation. And that's perfectly fine for somebody who is 23, 24 years old. You hope that he gets a little bit smoothed out. You know, we don't have eyes on him every day down at AAA Norfolk, so it's hard for us to determine exactly how he's doing it at second base, and stat box scores are not going to give you an entire picture of how a guy looks at second base. But if the organization who is watching him every day still thinks that he needs some work there, then he probably still needs some work at that position.
Right.
So him being rough around the edges at second base makes him even less of a candidate to come up and take some at-bats when Freddy Galvez went down.
And that's not to say that he's not in a good position to learn second base defensively.
Right.
This is an athlete that you are essentially teaching how to play second base because he is probably used to everywhere he went being the best athlete on the team. So people are probably saying, hey, go play center field, or hey, go play shortstop. He's bounced all around. So at this point in his career, you're trying to teach him how to play one specific position. And it's not a bad thing that he's a little rough around the edges at second base. He clearly has the athleticism to play the position.
Yeah. And I'm not going to use the term rough around the edges when it comes to his offensive production. But here's the rub when it comes to Jahmai Jones. He still has not produced at a consistent level offensively in the minor leagues. And there are various reasons for that. He has been traditionally younger than the bulk of the other prospects, whichever level he's been in. He's been promoted through the Angel system very quickly. So he's still only 23 and he's playing at AAA. He's younger than a lot of the players there. When he was in 2019, he was 21 turning 22, and he was in AA. 21-22 is still pretty young at AA. So he is behind the curve there. But still, the guy has only hit in 2019 at AA. He hit .234 with 5 homers. He had a .631 OPS. Now, this is not to knock Jahmai Jones and say that we don't have faith that Jahmai Jones will ultimately become a good MLB player. But when you have Domingo Leyba, who hit 300 the last time we saw him in AAA in 2019, over the course of 112 games, he hit 300, and he's still only 25. You have Ramon Urias, who in 37 career games has a 278 batting average, and we swear we had this take before he hit a 2-run homer yesterday, and also had a walk and collected another hit as well. And a 729 OPS in 37 career major league games, and he's still only 27. That's not the worst thing in the world. No. It is perfectly fine to have Domingo Leyba and to have Ramon Urias taking over when Freddy Galvez goes down. What is the rush with bringing Jahmai Jones up? I don't understand why people are very adamant that he has to be called up now.
Well, Paul, you brought up Jahmai Jones' 2019 stats. I also want to make very clear that I went on this podcast after the Alex Cobb trade and said that I thought it might be Mike Elias's best trade. We are on the Jahmai Jones train firmly.
Noticeably, Jahmai Jones stands.
Yes.
On this podcast. We have been since the time that trade was made.
So if I may predict our comment section here a little bit.
Yeah.
You brought up Jahmai Jones' 2019 stats, Paul. So let me throw out Jahmai Jones' 2021 stats in AAA. He's been very good. He's hitting 286 with an OPS over 900 in 23 games. You know who else has been very good at AAA this year, Paul?
Who?
Domingo Leyba.
Yeah.
In 23 games, the same amount of Jahmai Jones, he is hitting 344 with a 677 slugging percentage, an OPS over 1 with 9 home runs.
Right.
All of those numbers, Paul, are better than Jahmai Jones' numbers in AAA. Jahmai Jones' numbers are still very good, but why would you not give Domingo Leyba a chance if your argument is to give a younger Jahmai Jones a chance who is hitting slightly worse?
And Domingo Leyba, who is a year and a half or 2 years older than Jahmai Jones, and that's it.
Yeah.
He's 25, and also has a much longer track record of producing in the minors. Jahmai Jones, the last time he hit over 240 in a minor league season was 2017 when he split time between the single A level and the high A level in the Angels system. So this is, again, not to say that we don't think that Jahmai Jones can be a good MLB player, that he will eventually be a good MLB player, but he clearly has more work to do.
Yeah.
And for the comments that I saw that said, what else does Jahmai Jones have to do?
A bunch.
Do it consistently. The 286, the numbers that he's putting up in 23 minor league games, that's great. That's great. It's awesome to see, and hopefully it is a sign of things to come. But he has not hit over 240 in 4 years. 4 years. And I know he got his feet wet at the MLB level, and he made his debut last year with the Angels. That's awesome to see. But he still has not played an entire season at AAA. He has 23 career games at the AAA level. We've seen guys try to go from AA to the big leagues before without ever getting exposure to the AAA level. The alternate site is great, but that's not the same thing as a full AAA season, and they have struggled. Look at Zach Lowther. 2019 season in the AA level, comes up to the big leagues in 2021 without ever appearing in a AAA game, and he struggles immediately, has to go back down to AAA to get things right. That happens, and that's perfectly fine, but this is a learning process as we go through the post-COVID 2020 weird season where guys skip AAA. He probably needs more seasoning. And there is no rush for a guy who is 23, turning 24 years old, to bring him up. He's just not going to benefit all that much from getting called up too early. The risk of him getting called up too early, hurting his confidence, maybe he struggles in the field as well as at the plate. The risk of that is not worth the potential reward that he could come up and provide a spark, or at least he makes games a little bit more interesting to watch in the short term. I'm sorry, that's not Mike Elias's priority right now. His priority is, how can I build a World Series championship caliber team in the next few years? And if Jahmai Jones is benefiting more from getting regular at-bats at AAA than coming up and playing a position he's not entirely comfortable with to fill in for a guy, he's not going to benefit from that.
And an important piece of what you said there, Paul, there's no rush. To quote the trusty PEMDAS from high school, there is an order of operations to things. We cannot jump down the laundry list of what Mike Elias is doing here. There is a group of players that you need to see what you have in them. And I understand the argument of maybe you want Jahmai Jones at the major league level instead of somebody like Pat Valaika, who has not been hitting well so far this season. However, Pat Valaika hit well in 2020. Yes, a small sample size of that season, but he hit well. Pat Valaika deserves a chance at the major league level this year to prove that he can hit. And he has been a little bit better once he's come back.
I mean,
Pat Valaika, I think, is the one that you can make the case where you can say Jahmai Jones should be on this team instead of Pat Valaika.
Of the three, Valaika has the least case to be here. I will say that. But he does play shortstop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Valaika has not been fantastic. Like I said, he's hitting under 250 games and has just one home run, but he's versatile in the infield, which is important. Ramon Urias and Domingo Leyba, you deserve a chance to prove what you can do at the major league level, and Mike Elias needs to make sure that he is not finding diamonds in the rough here.
Yeah.
You can go to Jahmai Jones. You know that he has a lot of potential, and you are going to give him a lot of time at second base once he eventually comes up. Ramon Urias and Domingo Leyba probably have a much shorter leash because they are not on that top prospect list.
Exactly.
But you still need to give them a chance at the major league level because Domingo Leyba has been hitting amazingly at AAA. You need to see what you have in him at the major league level. And if you call Jahmai Jones up, you need to give him a chance because he's one of your top prospects. And that pretty much blocks Domingo Leyba. It pretty much blocks Ramon Urias unless he's playing consistently at shortstop because Jahmai Jones is going to be given that full opportunity once he has it.
Yeah. And does Jahmai Jones, because of that top prospect ranking, does he have a higher ceiling than both those guys?
Absolutely.
Absolutely he does. That's great. And that's doesn't mean that he should be called up sooner. And either a lot of and I get it, it's frustrating at times to see certain players struggle at the big league level and guys that are probably not going to be a part of this team long term. I get that. It's frustrating. However, the whole part of this thing is patience. The whole part of this thing is patience. And if you're impatient that you're not seeing the top prospect come up yet, it'll happen. It's going to come. It's just not going to come right now. And you have to trust the Mike Elias process here and understand that he knows these guys a little bit better than we do. So, I'm not saying blindly trust every decision that he's going to make. Mike Elias has said himself he's going to make mistakes at time. But I would personally rather he make a mistake in keeping a guy down for too long and making sure that he is 100% MLB ready than bringing a guy up too early, getting his confidence shot, and then having to send him back down for an extended time.
And I think there's absolutely a case to be made that in a few weeks, we should see Jahmai Jones instead of Pat Valaika if he continues to struggle. If Pat Valaika is not hitting well over the next 2 weeks, if he is the Orioles' consistent most day second baseman, as we are kind of assuming that he will be, if he's not playing well at second base and you think Jahmai Jones is going to be ready in a few weeks, sure, we can make an argument, DFA Pat Valaika and call up Jahmai Jones. But as of right now, the right move is to bring up a bunch of guys who have the infield versatility to replace Freddy Galvez. Because that is the primary issue with the Orioles right now. You need to figure out what you're doing at shortstop, and those answers are by three guys who have the ability to play shortstop. And that's what you need on the roster.
And if you're making the case that Jahmai Jones would be better than what you have on the field right now, there's one, no way of knowing that. But two, would you rather have the guy who hit 300 the last time we saw him in AAA or the guy who hit 234 the last time we saw him in AA?
Right.
Right now, you're probably going to get better production from Ramon Urias, who again has been fine to above average offensively in 37 career major league games, and Domingo Leyba, who again hit 300 at the AAA level in 2019. So I really don't think Jahmai Jones is going to be better. He might provide a spark, and he's going to be fun to watch. And whenever he gets called up, he will be fun to watch because of how athletic and terrific he is. However, he's probably not going to be more productive than what you're getting from Domingo Leyba and Ramon Urias.
And not an insignificant point, Michael Franco is still really struggling at third base.
Yeah.
And Domingo Leyba and Pat Valaika can both play third.
True.
Ideally, you want Michael Franco to pick things up, but he might not deserve to be in the lineup every single day at this point because he's not really hitting well.
Yeah.
And if Michael Franco isn't hitting well, then Why is he in the lineup? Because he's not great defensively at third. So in Domingo Leyba and Pat Valaika, you are keeping that versatility to move them to any 3 infield positions not named first base.
And case in point, I think Monday, Brandon Hyde gave Michael Franco the day off because he was scuffling, and that because he didn't have Jahmai Jones and because he had 3 guys on the roster who could, in theory, play third or second or shortstop.
He played all of them.
He played all of them. So it gives him a little bit more versatility and breathing room. He doesn't have a top prospect that he has to put in the field at a certain position every single day.
Right. There's also the other argument of, well, Stevie Wilkerson played second base in the outfield. Why don't you just call up Jahmai Jones, who also plays second base in the outfield? And to that I say Ryan McKenna is more major league ready, and Anthony Santander and Austin Hayes have been struggling with injuries, and you need somebody who can play a good defensive outfield, which is exactly what Ryan McKenna gives you at this point.
Yeah. Have we exhausted our breath
yes.
on this? We've just seen quite a lot.
Yeah.
So in summary, what more does he have to do? He has to consistently produce at the AAA level. And that's again, what else he has to do.
We are huge Jahmai Jones stans, but it's not the time.
It's not the time. It will be. When he's 24 and it's late in the season and he's still hitting 286 with, an OPS in the 800s or 900s, we'll reconsider.
If Pat Valaika is still struggling in a few weeks, I may have a different take.
Yes.
But as of right now, you just need the versatility.
You keep these guys there until they prove that they are not suited for it.
Yes.
And then you replace them with the top prospects.
Yes.
All right. Whew. Should we talk Tyler Wells?
Let's do it.
All right. Tyler Wells has been awesome, and that's all there is to say about that.
That's it. Next segment.
We're done. Yeah. No. Tyler Wells has been absolutely terrific, and he had maybe his best moment, or one of his best moments. He's had some good moments so far over the first half of the season. The other night in Houston, comes on, bases loaded, tie game after Tanner Scott walked in 2 runs, strikes out back-to-back Astros. Had some, for the lip readers out there, had some choice words, but I think I prefer the @Orioles lip reading instead that said, "Good night, I love you," instead of what he probably said. He was fired up. It's what we have learned about Tyler Wells in the short amount of time that he has been in Baltimore. 1, he is massive. 2, the guy is nails. And 3, when he gets a big K, he is fired up.
Yes.
And that is exciting to watch.
Yeah.
But he has been everything that the Orioles expected when they took him in the Rule 5 draft and a whole lot more. And we had high expectations for this guy when he was picked in the Rule 5 draft, even though he was the second Rule 5 pick that the Orioles had taken after Max Aroller. We thought, honestly, he had a better chance to stick on this roster than Max Aroller. And here we are, Max Aroller having been returned to his original team, and Tyler Wells is still here.
Yeah, Wells so far 2-0 with a 3.79 ERA, like you said, just 26 years old. And he's been really effective in high-leverage situations. And I think coming into the season, if you told me that Tyler Wells would be used in high-leverage situations, I would have laughed in your face. Because I thought Tyler Wells coming into the season was going to be the guy that the Orioles turned to if a starter got knocked out in like the 3rd or 4th inning and you needed somebody to just eat innings. I thought that would be Tyler Wells' role. But all of a sudden, the Orioles bullpen has had some struggles in places that they weren't expecting it. And Tyler Wells has been one of their more consistent bullpen arms. In June, he's got 14 1/3 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 18 strikeouts.
Yeah.
That's good for a 1.26 ERA. Opponents are hitting just 176 against him in the month of June, and he has not walked a single batter.
And those 2 runs came on June 19th when he inherited a top of the 9th, bases loaded situation facing, I think it was Bo Bichette.
It was Bo Bichette and then Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, and Bo Bichette had like this incredible at-bat where he fouls off a million pitches and then eventually drops one into right field that Anthony Santander almost makes a great catch on.
If Anthony Santander...
With 2 outs, I'm pretty sure.
Anthony Santander on a healthy ankle probably makes that catch.
And Tyler Wells is probably out of that inning, which means he would not have allowed any earned runs in the month of June.
Yeah.
The fact that he is getting these high-leverage opportunities, I think, is the unfortunate byproduct of the fact that we've seen Adam Plutko struggle. We've seen... other than Paul Fry, pretty much every bullpen arm struggle.
Yeah, Cesar Valdez on the IL. Tanner Scott has been walking a ton of batters.
Yeah, and like we said on the last podcast, the starters have not been going deep enough into these games because of various injuries to the rotation, of course, and because of inconsistencies from the rotation. So they have had to rely a lot on the bullpen. Brandon Hyde has needed some big innings. And in those back-to-back strikeouts the other night in Houston, Brandon Hyde said after the game flat out, Tyler Wells won the game for us. They were massive strikeouts. And the fact he clearly can handle these high leverage situations.
Yeah.
So that begs the question of, do you want to keep him in those high leverage situations? Do you want to move him to the rotation? And that's a question Brandon Hyde has been asked a whole lot over the past couple weeks by beat reporters.
Well, if you move Tyler Wells to the rotation at this point, who's going to pitch in the high leverage situations?
Yeah.
At that point, you're more or less left with Paul Fry, right? I really can't think of another Oriole at this point. I think has been consistently good in high. Hunter Harvey has been decent so far since coming back from injury.
I think Hyde would still like to give the ball to Tanner Scott. I think he still will, but I agree with you. Tanner Scott has been, his command has been shaky this year.
Personally, I would say that I think it's worth a shot to put him in the rotation, but you also have a bunch of guys that are going to be coming up soon, presumably, to be in the Orioles rotation. Alexander Wells is already at the major league level. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a start relatively soon. He's looked pretty good over his first few games. And of course, at AAA, there's still Zach Lowther, Mike Baumann. Kevin Smith is moving up quickly. Kyle Bradish is moving up quickly. So if Tyler Wells is going to get a shot in the rotation, it's probably going to have to be relatively soon before all of those guys are back and ready to go. And don't forget, too, Dean Kramer is down in AAA. He'll probably be back at some point soon. So I think if you're going to give Tyler Wells a shot, it should be sometime over the next few weeks until those AAA guys start to come up.
I think Baumann is still in AA, but all the other guys that you mentioned, AAA level, they're very close to the bigs. Yes and no. Going back to the Jahmai Jones conversation, I don't think that there's a rush for him to be moved to the rotation, and I do see the benefit of him getting consistent returns out of the bullpen and getting comfortable with that role because he was a starter the last time we saw him in minor league baseball several years ago. So I understand it from that perspective. I don't see the rush in trying to, maybe he gets thrown off his rhythm. It is obviously a vastly different preparation when you're talking about starting as opposed to coming out of the bullpen. So I don't see the rush in starting him at any point soon. And I just want to see the guy succeed. So if they think that he can succeed, the need to fill out your rotation and get better starts in the rotation, that's probably secondary to making sure that Tyler Wells' development occurs at a good pace.
Yeah, and you can make a case that a very good, consistent bullpen arm is just as important as a decent fifth starter.
Exactly. Like the 14 and a third innings that he's given you in June, those have been 14 and a third, for the most part, very important innings.
Right.
So he is going to give you important innings out of that bullpen at a time when they really need it. So, and eventually I think Bruce Zimmerman will come back from injury. They will fill out that rotation. But if that move comes at some point, it'll be exciting to see because I think he can handle it as well. He's got a legit 3-pitch mix. He has 5 pitches total, so he's got a couple other pitches that he can throw in there. But he relies on that fastball, slider, changeup. The fastball ranks above average according to StatCast in velocity, in spin, and there is really not much that's fluky about him. We've seen some fluky things. The Matt Harvey first couple months of the season were a little bit fluky. But this is not a fluky stretch for Tyler Wells. 88th percentile in K percentage, 85th percentile in chase rate, 80th percentile in whiff percentage. He has been legitimately good, and it's not like he's getting lucky. If anything, he got unlucky with that Blue Jays outing.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
So he has been legitimately good, and there is strong reason to believe that he is going to be a consistent big leaguer.
And at this point, it's really just where do you think he gives you more value? Because he's going to give you positive value whether he's in the rotation or whether he's in the bullpen. I think for Brandon Hyde at this point, it's probably just a question of what do you need him to do more? Do you need him to eat innings early in games? Or do you need him in high leverage situations? And as of right now, it looks like he needs him in high leverage.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Miguel Castro conversations from a few years ago when he was excellent out of the bullpen. He had great stuff, and fans were kind of clamoring to see him in the rotation. and then he got some starts in the rotation, and he struggled. So, and I'm pretty sure, other conversations were had about Tanner Scott at some point back when he was a top prospect, of whether you try to make him a starter and keep him in that rotation, or whether you use the few good pitches that he has in limited outings out of that bullpen. So, or facing limited batters. So it is a tough decision to make. I'm glad we don't have to make that decision.
Yes.
But for now, perfectly fine with seeing him come out of that bullpen and get huge outs.
Agreed.
And having him yell quite a lot.
Agreed.
Some choice curse words. But will be fun to watch. And it definitely softens the blow of losing Zach Pop, which we talked about in the Rule 5 draft, who is now struggling a little bit with the Marlins, but I think it's fair to say Zach Pop's probably not coming back to this Orioles organization.
No. His stuff is very good, and it is showing at the major league level. His results have not been fantastic, but he passes the eye test. The stuff is good.
And he's only 24 years old, so he's 2 years younger than Tyler Wells at this point. I have a feeling Kim Ang is going to want to hold on to him.
Pain.
Yeah. But softens the blow if they got Tyler Wells on their, assuming he's going to stick around for the rest of the season, they don't return him, to have him sticking with the team long term. That's pretty okay. And it softens the blow, honestly, of losing Max Soroller. And that's why you take two guys with in the Rule 5 draft.
Right.
So that you don't have to, you get more bites out of the apple there.
Yeah, you go 1 for 2 in the Rule 5 draft of a player that's actually good. It's a good Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, that's a perfectly fine outcome. Yeah. All right. Well, MLB draft is, crazily enough, a week and a half away. We don't know who the Orioles are going to take. We have no absolute clue who the Orioles are going to take. But one possibility that we have heard consistently is that the Orioles might go under slot and take somebody with a, pay him less money, save their money for later on in the draft, as they did last year with Heston Kjerstad. They had the number 2 overall pick. They could have gone with an Asa Lacy and Emerson Hancock and Austin Martin. They instead went with Heston Kjerstad, paid him under slot, and were able to pay Kobe Mayo and the likes of those guys, high school talents, later on in the draft. One guy that I think the Orioles could do that with this year, and he would fit that strategy, Colton Cowser from Sam Houston State. And honestly, if you're looking for what is the 2021 draft version of Heston Kjerstad, Colton Cowser kind of fits that.
He kind of does. I mentioned on the last podcast where if the Orioles are looking for a college bat, the best one in the draft is probably Henry Davis, the catcher from Louisville. Colton Cowser probably has a case to be made to be the second best college bat in this draft.
Yeah. Hit in the 370s with Sam Houston State. Obviously not a program that is known for churning out top MLB talent. He could be, if he is taken at number 5, he would be the highest drafted Sam Houston State Bearcat of all time. Very intriguing prospect. So we caught up with his head coach, Jay Sirianni, who was kind enough to provide a scouting report on Colton Cowser. Here's our conversation from earlier. And now we're joined on the MASN All Access Podcast by Jay Sirianni, who is the head coach for Sam Houston State. That would be the team of Colton Cowser, potential future first-round pick in the MLB draft. Coach, thanks so much for hopping on with us.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
So let's start with, I was looking through the statistics for your season last year. This is your second season as head coach with Sam Houston State. Though you've been with the team for longer than that, so you've gotten to know Colton for a little bit longer. And just looking through the statistics, I mean, Colton Cowser's name is all over your team leaderboards. How important was he to your offense last year in his junior year, where he was just leading the team in average on-base percentage, tied for the team lead in homers? What did he mean to your lineup?
Well, he was really big. He was maybe the biggest piece we've had, and really in the conference, a lot of people didn't even want to pitch to him. So huge piece for us, and really he did everything for us to kind of help us overachieve, and he was a great leader on and off the field. So he was a big piece of this program for sure.
Coach, in his 55 games, you mentioned it a little bit that pitchers didn't even want to pitch to him. He had 42 walks and just 32 strikeouts. How much of that was just really good plate discipline, and how much of it was just pitchers not wanting to throw him strikes?
Well, it definitely starts with strike zone discipline. I mean, he understands, one, what he can hit well and hit hard, and two, he's not going to chase a whole lot. And then the other thing, I don't know the number of intentional walks, but there were a lot of times where he never even put a foot in the box. He just kind of kept going straight to first. So, but he definitely has a real good feel for the strike zone, and then to add to it the pitches that he can do damage to.
Yeah, and not just at the plate, but on the base paths as well. He had 17 stolen bases. That led the team. You expect some speed, of course, when you have a center fielder, but was he a true threat on the base paths for you when he was out there trying to steal bags?
Well, I think the first thing is he gets really, really good jumps. He understands, how pitching is going to try to get the guy out behind him, but so he's a good base runner. He's also a really good runner. So, the combination of it, he basically had the green light all year. And when we did give him the red light, he wanted the green light. So very aggressive, good base runner. And then plus he can run.
All right. So coach, the scouting report will tell you that he doesn't have a ton of loft to his swing, but he had a stretch of 5 straight games in April with a home run. Do you think his power will translate at the next level, or is he more of a gap to gap hitter?
Well, yeah, that's always the $1 million question. I think guys a lot smarter than me will figure that out. But I know his bat to ball skills are really good. It's flat. He does understand how to lift the ball. I think he's a hitter first at the end of the day, and the power's definitely going to come. I mean, he's a big kid. He's a big, strong kid, but he does know how to hit, and I think that's the first thing. He doesn't get real tied up into trying to hit jacks, and he likes them. Don't kid yourself, but he's a hitter first.
Yeah, that 370 plus batting average is a good indication of a guy who's just making good contact with the ball. And defense-wise, mentioned that he plays center field, of course. Was he a reliable center fielder for you guys, and do you think that that's something that he can play at the next level, or would you expect him maybe to shift over to a corner spot?
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, he can play center field. It all starts with kind of the first thing is the way he works day in and day out at his craft defensively. I mean, he takes BP really serious and gets after it out there, and his jumps are good. He takes really good angles and routes, and I don't want to be the guy that says he can't play center field. I just believe in my heart that he can, and somebody else is going to have to tell him he can't. I'll let somebody else deal with that.
So we've talked about all of his skills, all the things that he can do really well. Is there a professional player that you would compare his game to, or maybe compare what he could be in the future?
Well, I've had that question asked a bunch, and I guess, I don't want to, undersell him or whatever you want to call it, but I would say Yelich. That's the comp kind of body wise. He has no torso, but he can really, really run, and it's flat, a lot like Yelich was when he first got to the big leagues. And I would say that's the best comp that I can give him.
That would be a great outcome if that ends up being the outcome. But of course, just looking at him, of course, being a first round pick, that would be a great start as well. But watching his tape, he even kind of looks like Christian Yelich at the plate, at least from our end as well. And then, I mentioned off the top that you've been in that Sam Houston State program for several years now. You were the pitching coach before you were the head coach. So you've gotten to know Colton inside the clubhouse as well as on the field. What kind of person is Colton Cowser, and do you think that he could be a leader for a pro ball club?
Well, I think you start off with his makeup, number one. I mean, he graduated in 3 years. He has over a 3.8 cumulative GPA in construction management. I don't know if the kid's ever had a bad day. There's times where you're kind of like, hey, Colton, let's take this a little more serious. And he just doesn't. He's fun loving. The guys like him. He's not, we call it not too cool for school. He'll do anything. And he, like I said, he's never had a bad day. Loves to work. His teammates like being around him, and really, they like to give him a bunch of grief, and that's always good when your best player can take the grief as much as give it out. So, I don't have anything bad to say about the kid. He comes to the house, he plays with my kids. He's just a good all-around kid.
That's awesome to hear. And if whatever team that ends up taking him, I'm sure he will be picked in the first round or first couple rounds, will be getting a solid kid as well as a good player as well. But Jay, thanks so much for hopping on here. We really appreciate it. Do you have draft plans? Do you have any plans in relation to Colton for what you're doing on the night of the first round of the MLB draft?
Well, yes and no. It's always recruiting season and that kind of thing. We'll probably be down close to his hometown and probably swing by for sure. Got a meeting later with our sports information people about how we're going to do this. So it's going to be a special night for the Cowser family, number one. And that's what it's about. It's about the kids and the parents. And, we're just excited for him and to be a part of it. So we can't thank Colton and his family enough on our end, and fired up for him.
Absolutely. Could be a part of history as the highest drafted member of the Sam Houston State Bearcats. But even if he's not, could be a special night as well if he goes in that first round. So, Coach, thanks so much for hopping on. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, guys. Have a great day.
So that was Sam Houston State head coach Jay Sirianni talking about Colton Cowser. We will keep you, apprised of more draft news, draft interviews as they come over the next couple of weeks. We will have plenty to discuss there as well. But we do have some breaking news now.
We do.
Because we are live on the MASN All Access Podcast. Brendan, care to share?
I just might.
Stone cold newsman.
Adley Rutschman.
Yeah.
Representing the Orioles at the Futures game.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. The pitcher representative for the Orioles,
Marcos Duplan.
I
suggested when the Orioles got Marcos Duplan a couple years ago that they create some version, some hashtag, like how they have Trust the Process for the Sixers in Philadelphia. Like Trust Duplan, stick with the Duplan, some kind of pun there.
Yeah, well, that'll do it for the podcast.
Anyway, it's going to be great to see that Adley Rutschman is going to be represented by the Orioles in the Futures game, which means that they will have future representative in Adley Rutschman as well as Marcos Duplan. They will have Trey Mancini there in the Home Run Derby, which is going to be awesome to see. Cannot think of a better candidate for the Home Run Derby. For what the Home Run Derby is, which is really just, doesn't ultimately matter all that much. Who wins, how these guys do, not a huge deal. So for a guy who's probably not going to be an all-star, when the rosters are announced, it's probably going to be Cedric Mullins, will be the Orioles representative. To see Trey Mancini at least be there, get to hang around the other all-stars, get to experience the fanfare of the all-star game, and receive the attention that he is due, that is a great thing for the O's.
Yeah, for my podcast notes here today, Paul, I wrote down two things under Trey Mancini for the Home Run Derby. I wrote down heck yeah and dingers.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing that Trey Mancini is able to participate in the Home Run Derby. It is the best story in baseball. Yeah. And it's going to be a ton of fun to watch him participate.
Well, he'll be the story of the Derby, too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Whether or not he wins, it is going to be fantastic to see him participating.
Absolutely. For what it is, for what the Derby is, he is a perfect candidate.
Yes.
So that'll be fun. And it'll be a good time during the All-Star break to just relax on a Monday night and watch Trey Mancini hit dingers.
Yeah, and we don't praise Major League Baseball as a whole a ton on this podcast. This is an awesome move by Major League Baseball.
Yes.
Very good
deserving.
Call.
It's not like, obviously, it's not like they're shoehorning him in.
Right.
He's been a consistent power hitter for the past couple of years. Say for 2020, he was a consistent power hitter, hit 35 dingers in 2019. So it's going to be great to see. And honestly, he will have more than just people in Baltimore, I'm sure, rooting for him. And it'll increase his status, help him become more of a household name, which honestly he should be at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. If you do not have a hometown player in the Home Run Derby, you should be rooting for Trey Mancini.
Absolutely. All right. That'll just about do it for the MASN All Access Podcast. Thanks to Bobby Blanco for running the show today. Be sure to check out the podcast. If you're not watching live, you can do so on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And of course, rate, review, subscribe on all your favorite platforms. Share with your friends, give it 5 stars, all that good stuff. He is Brendan Mortensen at Brendan Morty on Twitter. I am at Paul Mancano on Twitter as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back in a week as we prepare further for the MLB draft. So stick with us then, and we'll see you next time.